Every rain season, Zambia loses millions of liters of rainwater that goes to waste as runoff. This is because there are no facilities that can be used to store the water. On this edition of News In Depth, we look at rainwater harvesting and what government and its stakeholders in the water sector is doing to harvest the water. I am your host, Macpherson Mkuka. Stay tuned. Water, the world's most used natural resource, described as the backbone of all living things, humans, animals, and plants. The resource plays a role that cannot be replaced by any other natural resource, as it is at the center of life. Water remains the most critical component of humans' day-to-day activities. However, with the passage of time and due to certain human activities, the resource is slowly diminishing. Other factors leading to the depletion of water include little or no rainfall and high temperatures that have resulted into drying off of major water bodies. Zambia has not been an exception to this development. For the last few years, most parts of the country have recorded poor rainfall, leading to the shortage of water required for household and commercial use. For urban areas, tap water has become scarce due to various reasons, and the low water table level is among them. This causes the water utility companies to fail to pump expected amount of water to supply to customers.
We depend on these dams and these rivers, and it means that if we don't have water in these areas, it means that we are not able to meet our demand in terms of supply hours for our consumers. A great example I would give is the Chongwe River. As you know, the Chongwe River has been overdammed. As a result, we are not storing enough water in that river. Which means that I think for the last 2 or 3 years, we've been having a situation when we reach the dry season, we have to start transporting water by road from Lusaka into Chongwe, making our operations very expensive and very difficult for us. But as a utility, we are determined, and we have engaged the relevant stakeholders to see how best they could help us, because our mandate only ends at extracting water from the rivers and supplying it to the people.
Climate change in Zambia has worsened the situation in as far as access to water is concerned. Zambia National Climate Change Secretariat Participatory Adaptation Specialist Martin Sishekanu says human activities such as agriculture and timber processing have contributed to the poor rainfall the country has recorded in the previous seasons.
You'll find a situation where even in areas where the rain pattern was consistent, now when the winds come, because it is no longer having any restriction, people are experiencing that it rains a kilometer from here, there is rain, here it is dry. And so the rain pattern changes because we have changed the surface corrugation, as we may put it, that will bring some restriction and friction to the movements. And even in the convectional way of winds, a number of places in Zambia were experiencing some convectional rainfall. But convectional rainfall means movements of wind, the hot being replaced by the cold, and as the hot goes, it gets cooled, and then again the formation of rainfall that becomes affected.
For the crop farmers, lack of water is a challenge to their business. National Union of Small-Scale Farmers Association of Zambia Director General Dr. Frank Kayula says any delay or shortage in rainfall means poor yields, waste for farmers who do not practice irrigation.
You are aware, Macpherson, that for small-scale farmers, they are highly rainfall dependent. And so when there is no moisture from above, then the seed will not germinate. And if something is already in the ground and it has grown, it means definitely the small-scale farmer is going to experience the wilting of the crops. And that's a challenge, because at the moment our small-scale farmers are not able to harvest the water, either from the rain or even get the water right from the ground. It's very difficult for them, no technology that is helping them to do that. And challenges are plenty in that regard, because it means for the small-scale farmers, they're not going to have the harvest that they intended to have if there is no support of water from anywhere else other than the rain. So when the rains are not there for the small-scale farmers, it's trouble, deep trouble.
And Mr. Sishekano indicates that the major problem to all these challenges is lack of sustainable programs aimed at conserving the little water resource Zambia holds.
This water, as we said, has to be managed. Water is there, but we lose the water into the oceans because we don't have enough storage capacity created to hold the water and have it slowly released into the system. So we have a management issue that we have to deal with. We have a land use issue that we have to deal with. Land use in terms of there's need to identify which areas and for what purpose these areas ought to be used for. Other areas should be retained as catchment areas for our water conservation. Whilst the other areas, as we open them to agriculture, it is important for us to say what kind of agricultural practices should we adopt that will be able to retain water in situ instead of letting the water be lost.
And Water and Sanitation Association of Zambia, WASAZA Chief Administrative Officer Jonathan Piri says continued water challenges in most parts of the country calls for the need to find lasting and sustainable solutions.
The challenge I see is that while we know that every citizen, whether urban or rural setting, should have access to safe and clean drinking water, the infrastructure that we have as a nation is inadequate because right in town we haven't really reached 90% of water supply provision of the services. We are somewhere around 80 just for urban areas, and for rural it's actually much lower.
Good news has, however, emerged. Government has in the last few years been trying to find means of how to store rainwater for future use at both household and commercial levels. The practice being championed is rainwater harvesting. It involves direct collection of rainwater. The rainwater collected can be stored for direct use or can be recharged into the ground. Early in 2016, government announced that it would begin the rainwater harvesting projects in selected provinces, a move that was implemented in the course of the year. The project includes construction of new dams and rehabilitating existing ones.
We have done a lot of dams that are on probably 100% and 99%. We are talking of Chikowa Dam in Mambo district, that is in Fue. This project, the dam project, is 100% complete, and people are using this dam for irrigation and other purposes, water supply in the district. And we are looking also at Chiwalashi Dam, which is situated in Mansa. The works are almost 99% done, and they are doing the lawn around the dams. And I think this dam, in the next few months, it will be 100% done.
The program has elated WASAZA.
That is going to address the challenges that we have in the rural areas, and especially the irrigation support project which the government has begun with the aim, with the view to constructing dams, that will bring water closer to the people, because dams will be one form of harvesting water and storing water for people to access.
In urban areas, rainwater harvesting is not a prominent prospect, as most households rely on tap water from utility companies. It is entirely a different scenario in rural areas. People in these places depend entirely on pure water trapped in wells or nearby rivers for day-to-day use. With only about 40% of the entire water resource in the southern region, the need to devise strategies aimed at conserving the water has been deemed as an essential move. Water Resources Management Authority WAMA Director General Dr. Paul Kapotwe says the authority has formulated guidelines in a quest to safeguard the water resource.
Water belongs to the president, it doesn't belong to an individual. Even if a river flows through your farm, that river belongs to the president on behalf of the citizens. That's one basic principle. The second principle guideline is that water must be managed in an integrated water resources management mode. In other words, international conditions have been assigned to manage water. Third, it must be equitably allocated. Not equally allocated, but equitably allocated. In other words, there must be balanced enjoyment of this resource by all and sundry. Small-scale user, villager in the village, a urban dweller, an industry like a brewery, or indeed the mines as they're mining water, and the environment. All these must be equitably supported with that water. Those four basic principles are ones that guide how water is managed in this country. We license every user of water except the domestic one, because the domestic one, we believe, needs water for drinking, and that's a survival element. But for every other water user, they must get authority from the president through this institution by way of giving them what is called a water permit, with the different conditions of how much water they must pump from a river or watercourse, or what kind of volume they must use from a particular dam or infrastructure that they have constructed. Those are our day-to-day things to manage and monitor how much water is being used and for what purpose it is being used.
And Dr. Kapotwe says failure to adhere to the guidelines attracts stiffer penalties.
Section 172, as a matter of fact, defines sanctions on users that do not obey what is indicated there. For instance, if a user applies for a permit and we grant that permit with a certain volume, but they abstract or pump more than we have located, they have committed a crime. For lack of a better word, they've stolen the difference in the water that they were allocated. And the sanctions are defined there. It begins with a minimum of 50,000 penalty units and has a maximum of a custodial sentence of 3 years in prison, or both, depending on the gravity of the offense.
For farmers, rainwater harvesting program has come in handy, though with challenges.
Well, that's very good news for us as far as we are concerned. But the only problem is that you harvest this water in dams that may not be closer to the farmers, unless government will go an extra mile to ensure that there are structures to distribute that water that will be harvested in dams. For us, it's a plus to government. They have done a very good job and we support them, but we also want to see structures that will deliver this water to the small-scale farmers.
Community-based rainwater harvesting in rural areas of Zambia has become more common today than it was before. It is, in fact, only with this underdeveloped technology that people are able to survive in water-scarce areas. Wasaza believes upgrading the wells to sanitary-friendly rainwater harvesting technologies will help improve sanitation in targeted areas.
That will improve the quality of water, but the improvement should not only be on water sources, but also on sanitation service provision. I'm sure you know about the CLTS, the community-led total sanitation project, which has been the government has actually been spearheading and promoting across the country. UNICEF has been the major promoters of this program, but it has actually covered the whole country. And one would wish that all the villages in our country were OD-free, meaning open defecation free, as some of the villages have actually been declared open defecation. If we attain that status for every village, for every headman, for every chiefdom, we can safely say that we can concentrate on improving the water sources.
The implementation of rainwater harvesting projects, such as the construction of dams, requires huge investments. This requirement, however, does not discourage government in view of the immense benefits it presents.
This is a new concept, and the government is very, very committed in ensuring that we begin to appreciate this technology of harvesting of water, rainfall water. This is very, very cardinal, because government is going to put up a policy to encourage and sustain this technology of harvesting of the rains. And this is very, very, very good. There's a Water Users Association who are being, they are the owners of the waters and installations. So they begin to assume these huge installations and use them for their own purpose. And it is very, very cardinal that the government encourages this on a national level, on a domestic level, and industrial level.
The practice, however, calls for an environmentally friendly approach. Zambia Environmental Management Agency Senior Inspector Charity Narweya shares best practices of carrying out water harvesting projects.
So with regards to dam construction, of course, there are several impacts that come with that. There are impacts that, that you really be looking at various phases of the dam development. First of all, there are impacts at construction phase that you should be looking at. There are impacts also at operational phase, and there will be impacts, of course, at decommissioning phase when you decide to decommission that dam. So when you look at the construction phase, of course, you'll be looking at really, are there, this area that you have identified, what are the other existing structures? Are there people living in that area? Are there settlements, for example? And so, of course, that's where also the stakeholder consultation becomes very relevant. If there are people, you then need to engage the people and find out, what their responses to having this dam constructed in this area.
And climate change participatory adaptation specialist Martin Sishekanu suggests long-term measures that need to be set in implementing rainwater harvesting projects.
We need a good resource to be able to put up the water storage structures. And if we are to put up the water storage structures, we also need to look at the land use and help the people manage the land. So sustainability or sustainable land management is an important aspect that must go along with the creation of water storages. We have to have an in situ water management where we are saying on the farm, to capture the water that falls, the rainfall that falls from the sky, instead of allowing it to be lost. So those who are doing agriculture, that is why then you hear of conservation agriculture. In the conservation agriculture, you are saying, can you reap your soil instead of plowing it? Reap it, so that the reap lines are going to be entry points. When rain falls, it will go into the soil instead of having the water run on the soil surface.
Rainwater may not always be safe for use, especially for cooking and drinking. Zambia Institute of Environmental Health Secretary General Edgar Mlwanda now shares health precautions that must be adhered to before consuming rainwater.
When rainwater comes and reaches the consumer, the person who is going to use it, you should ensure that that water is safe. The use of the rainwater should be, you should know what you use that rainwater for after you do the water analysis. It's very important that the water is tested. I know that people might say, oh, how can we manage it? But time and again, I think environmental health staff take water samples And we are encouraging environmental staff to be also taking rainwater samples to laboratory for analysis so that we can know what is in that water. Because as we said, we have quite a number of impurities which can contaminate water and can bring about different diseases. You have diarrheal diseases if at all the water is contaminated using by microorganisms, and also chemical contamination can also bring about different other health effects. So in order to ensure that we are not having those effects from rainwater, we need to have our water tested.
Mr. Mlonda further provides guidelines on how harvested rainwater can be safe for domestic use.
If you want to use your water for drinking, ensure that the surfaces where you are collecting your water from, the catchment surfaces, the roofs are cleaned. Every time and again, the roofs should be cleaned. And apart from cleaning, you should ensure that the first few millimeters of water, the first few drops of water as it comes down, when it rains, especially when it is like the beginning of the rain season, do not harvest that water. Let it flush. Even those who got bigger tanks where they harvest water from, they should have a mechanism of flushing the water so that you don't have the impurities or any microorganisms coming into the storage facility. And with our colleagues who just use buckets, when it's raining, then you just put the buckets there. There also there's a danger because they can be splashes, as water is splashing. You don't put the buckets all the way where the water is dropping, different points. So we should ensure that as we are there, as people harvesting water, which is definitely helping us because everyone is trying to encourage water harvesting as a sustainable way of use of water. We should ensure that the water we are using, the rainwater we are using, is safe from contamination.
Bearing in mind the challenges that come with reduced water levels during dry seasons and sometimes delayed rainfall, the Lusaka Water and Sewerage Company is of the view that rainwater harvesting will help in meeting the high demand for the resource.
It will help not only us as a utility, but all the water utilities in the country in terms of making sure that we have the commodity to supply to our people in various districts of Lusaka, and even other utilities that are not based in Lusaka will also be able to get water from these dams and be able to supply to the people.
The Zambia Environmental Management Agency is equally in support of the decision by government to embark on rainwater harvesting and has pledged its expertise in the implementation process.
This is actually a very proactive direction that government is taking, because you know that, of course, our countries, the African countries or the developed countries, will be impacted more by impacts of climate change, and yet we have very little capacity to, to adapt to these impacts. So dam construction, water harvesting through dam construction is a sustainable way. And of course you realize that in a number of places, for example, you can take a leaf from the dam that's been constructed in Katete, an earth dam that has been constructed in Katete and is managed by Eastern Water and Sewerage. That is a good example of what we should be doing in a number of places also.
And National Union of Small-Scale Farmers Association of Zambia Director General Dr. Frank Kayula has an appeal to government over the setting up of rainwater harvesting facilities.
Probably what we would encourage, other than just dams, we know we have worked with JICA before and they are doing weirs as well. Weirs are smaller than dams, and weirs can be multiplied in number. At the moment, the JICA program, why we like it and praise it, is that they are using local materials to start with. And where the farmers make money, our proposal has been, we start with those that are using temporal materials, as proposed by JICA. At least farmers begin harvesting water from the rivers and small streams for production of agricultural products. But then when the farmers grow and make money, or alternatively, when government sees the need, when they have money, we can turn those temporal weirs into permanent weirs so that the farmers can harvest water continuously. That's also another angle that government can look at.
Setting up rainwater harvesting facilities is one thing, and managing them is another. And Wama says it is up to task to ensure all water resources are well managed.
Actually, we're across the board. In fact, I must mention that the issues to do with rainwater harvesting is an age-old tradition. Even in traditional society, people used to harvest water for a rainy day. By rain, I mean there's no rain, so they can use that water. And then these technologies have advanced over time, and there are a number of policies that are in place. We must also recognize that there's a critical nexus between groundwater and surface water. Without one, the other cannot develop. So as we are allowing and advising our citizens to conserve water and make sure we avoid loss as much as possible, our meaning is that we must not resort to go and tap the groundwater, because that's like a vault underground. We're keeping that water under security, so that we can only tap it if we do not have sufficient water.
Government envisions better participation by members of the community where water harvesting is being introduced. This is against the background that new initiatives tend to fail if they lack appreciation and participation from the locals.
The message to people that will be using this infrastructure, the end users, is that they must take care of these infrastructures. They should treat them as personal, because government builds them for the community, and the community should take total ownership of these infrastructure and look after them. Guard them against vandalism, because we've seen a lot of government installation, a lot of government properties that are being vandalized, and we are not sensitizing the community to look after these infrastructures that are built at a very, very huge cost. So we want to encourage people to own these technologies and begin to appreciate them in a manner that we want government, we want our people to appreciate.
Water harvesting technology is especially relevant to the semi-dry and dry areas where the problems of environmental degradation, drought and population pressures are most evident. It is an important component of the list of solutions for these problematic zones, and there is no doubt that implementation of water harvesting techniques will expand in Zambia. This is where we come to the end of this week's edition of News in Depth. We have been looking at rainwater harvesting, a practice that government is encouraging each and every citizen to participate. I have been your host, Macpherson Mkuka. Be sure to join us next week for yet another exciting News in Depth program. For now, it's goodbye and God bless you.